Alright guys, so you've made it to the last video lesson in Unit 2. How exciting is that? And in this one, we're going to be talking about simple interest, which is very applicable to real life. And here's your I can statement, is to find simple interest by using the simple interest formula. So here's the formula. The amount of interest that you will make on a certain amount of money can be found by plugging in the values and multiplying. Let's talk about what this means though. Okay, so let's say hypothetically you put $500 in the bank. Let's say this principal amount was $500. And the rate of interest per year is going to be a percent. So let's say you're making 5% return on that money. And then T stands for the time in years that the money earns interest. So let's say you let it sit there for 10 years. We could calculate using this formula how much interest you would make. And that's just, kind of the reason I guess we're doing this is because in every bank that you stick your money in, you're going to be given an interest rate. And so we just need to develop an understanding of how interest is earned. So let's look at our first example here. All right, how much interest was earned? Well, it tells us our principal amount, our original deposit, is $300. Our rate of return, or our rate of interest per year, is 4%, and our time is 2 years. So we simply take the formula and plug in the numbers. I equals $300 times the rate of interest of 4% times the 2 years. Notice that I turned the percent into the decimal. I have to do that because the decimal calculates better for us. We can multiply this decimal easier than we can multiply a percent. And so this is going to get us the interest earned on this. Okay, so 2 times 300, 600. 600 times 400 would probably be, let's see, let me double check my mental math here real quick. So 300 times 400 times 2 is going to be $24. So you will have earned $24 in interest over the course of 2 years. Now you might think, well, that's not a lot of money. But remember, you haven't done anything to make that money. You just stuck it in the bank, and the bank gave you $24 in 2 years. Right now, the interest rates aren't that high if you're just in a regular bank savings account, but $300 isn't a lot of money. So the more money you can put into a fund that gives you interest, the more free money, so to speak, you can make. Let's do a few more example problems. Okay, Natalie deposits $600 into her savings account that earns 4% simple interest each year. How much will be in her account after 10 years? All right, that's a great question. So to figure that out, we need to figure out how much interest she's going to make. So she deposited $600, so that's my P number here. The interest rate was 4%, so I'm going to turn that into a decimal, and it was for 10 years. So let's figure out how much interest she's going to earn on this. So 600 times 400 times 10 gets me to $240. So that means then that the interest is $240. So I is $240. But it didn't ask how much interest she was going to earn. It asked how much will be in her account after 10 years. So we have to add that to the original amount. So she's going to not only have the original $600 in her bank, but she's also going to have the amount of interest that she earned. And when you add those together, you get $840. That's pretty cool. So just after 10 years, she will have grown the amount of money she deposited from $600 to $840. And so what I'm doing with this formula is I'm just plugging in the values that they give into this formula and then doing some calculations. Let's look at one more, though, that may not be quite as straightforward. In this particular case, they give us the amount of interest, and they want to know how much was the principal. So again, I'm going to take the formula, and I'm going to plug in what I know. In this case, I know what the I is. The I's interest, and it's 440. So 440 equals P. I don't know what P is, because that's the variable that we're solving for. But I know that the rate of interest is 5%. So I know I can multiply that by 500, because again, I had to convert that into a decimal, and the time was 4. Okay, so when you're faced with a situation like this, you need to figure out what this letter P stands for, or what number it has to be. And there's a way we can do it algebraically. We combine the numbers that we know. So what is 4 times 500? That would be the question. And so we can write this as 440 equals P times, what would that be? 2/10 or 20 hundredths, depending on how you want to say it. If you're not convinced, we'll double check. Yep, 2/10. And I'm going to get rid of this extra 0 because this is kind of confusing. So 2/10 is fine way to say it. And now you have to still figure out what P stands for. Remember, when you're solving for a variable, you do the opposite of what's going on. So because we're multiplying on this side of the equation, we're going to divide by 2/10. And whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other side of the equation. So because 0 and 2/10 divided by 0 and 2/10 is 1, they cancel out because 1 times P is just P, because 1 times any number is itself. So those cancel, and we're left with just the principal amount. And then we just simply do the math. 440 divided by 0.2 gets us $2,200. So what that means is the original deposit must have been $2,200 if you were to earn $440 in 4 years at a 5% interest rate. So we have solved that principal amount. Again, all I did was take the formula, plug in what I know, solve for what I didn't know. Okay, one more example. And this one might be the trickiest of them all, but I know we can do it. Okay, so let's get that formula there out of the way a little bit. How many years will it take for $5,000 to triple at an interest rate of 5%? There's a few different ways we could think about this problem and go about solving it. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the numbers that I know. So I know I'm going to end up with $5,000 as my principal deposit, my principal amount. My interest rate is 5%, so R is 0.05 or 5 hundredths. And I don't know what T is because that's what it wants to know. It wants to know how much time in years it's going to take for me to triple this. But now I have to think, okay, what would it take interest-wise for me to triple 5,000? How am I going to figure that out? Well, I have to think, okay, triple means basically times 3. So what's 3 times 5,000? Oh, that's $15,000. But if we read the question real careful here, it says how many years will it take for 5,000 to triple at an interest rate of 5%? So if we were to triple 5,000, that means the total amount of money we'd have is 15,000. So that means our interest earned would need to be 10,000 because 10,000 plus the initial deposit is at total 15. Let me see if I can make this a little more clear. The principal amount that we're putting into the account is 5,000. We're going to earn 5% interest. Put it in there for a long enough time, and hopefully we're going to earn an interest number of 10,000. So that $10,000 in interest plus the principal of 5,000 gets us that total of 15,000. And the reason I knew I needed a total of 15,000 was because it said triple and the original amount was 5,000. So now we need to do some math on this to figure it out. All right. First, we're going to combine these two numbers here. So 5,000 times 5 hundredths. And we end up with 250. So 250 times the letter T equals 10,000. Now again, because we're using multiplication, and when I don't put a multiplication symbol here and I just have the number and the letter, you guys know that that means multiplication. So I'm going to divide by 250 so that these will cancel out and I'll just be left with T. So I have to divide both sides by 250. Okay, well, like I said, we can do all this in our head, but I'm going to prove to you that I'm not crazy when I tell you what these numbers are by showing you on my calculator. So T must be 40. That means if you wanted to go from $5,000 to a total of $15,000 to earn $10,000 in interest, it would take 40 years. So again, all I did on this problem was took the formula, plugged in what I knew to solve for what I didn't know. I know you guys are going to do a great job on this and have fun.